This podcast provides a platform for our guests to express their own personal views and opinions. Some or all of these views and opinions may not be shared by Ben and/or Yoel.
Welcome to the Too Dad to Quit podcast,
the podcast where we highlight stories of dads on the other side of divorce
to inspire and give strength to dads going through it.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Yoel.
Welcome back to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and we want to tell your story. So please reach out and get in touch with us so we can share your story and help others. This week, we talked to Barry Nussbaum. He is a family attorney in Toronto, and he happens to be very knowledgeable on the subject. We got into laws locally, how the system works. We got into some pretty philosophical conversations about what we think should be happening, what we shouldn't be happening, how the court system works. Is there a solution? And I think, being the non-lawyer, I was able to push back for the regular guy. So everybody, that was for you. And, I'd like to hear what Yoel thought about it, because I think it was right up his alley, but hear it from him.
Yeah, this is definitely one of my favorites. And that's not just because Barry is a very old and dear friend of mine, but like you said, Ben, he's super articulate and he has a very successful practice. I think he has 19 employees and he really knows his stuff. And what I really liked about it was the debate that we had, like you said, on a very philosophical level, discussing what the courts can do, what the courts should do. Is there fairness? Is there balance between men and women, between spousal rights, access, custody, all sorts of issues? But what I really appreciated as well is that he gave sort of the human element. It's not, one could look at the system as being sort of very mechanical, but he kind of gave a glimpse into, what is the underlying policy beneath all these decisions that the courts make. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to agree. We got into a pretty spirited debate. Like you said, Ben, you look at yourself as being the defender of the layperson, and Barry and I were kind of ganging up. But there's obviously a lot of complexity, and I think the viewers are really going to benefit from the deepness of the discussion.
And yes, this is our first foray into having on a professional related to a divorced situation, and we hope to have on more. And so we hope that his knowledge gives you insights into the behind the scenes. If you haven't gone through it, if you're about to go through it, if you're still going through it, I think he's got a lot of knowledge that he's sharing that can benefit you. Enjoy.
So we're very excited to have with us Barry Nussbaum. Barry is our first family law professional to be featured on our podcast. He's also a very dear and longtime friend of mine. Barry has been in practice since 2005 from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And he has a very impressive resume. His credentials include being the founding manager of a firm with 19 employees. So he's a very busy man, helping a lot of people with their divorce cases, among many other things. In his personal life, he is a happily married father of 5 beautiful children, each of whom I know personally. I wanted to add a personal note as well, which would probably embarrass Barry, but I have to say that when I was going through my own divorce, Barry, I remember like yesterday when I first told you it was happening. I remember where I was sitting.
So do I.
And I have to say, Barry and I have a very joking, funny, fun relationship. But in all sincerity, Barry, it's funny for me to call you Barry because I've got another name for you, knowing you as long as I do, but I'll try and remember to refer to you as Barry. Barry, you've been really like an unbelievable source of support, friendship, really being what a friend is meant to be, whether it's been, sharing your insights, being there to listen, checking in with me a lot. That's really, really important for somebody going through a very lonely time, which is divorce. And I'm really grateful, and I'm grateful to have you. Ben and I are grateful to have you with us on the podcast. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So like I was saying in the brief bio I did for you just now, this is kind of new for us. It's new territory because you're coming at it from the angle of being a professional here. The purpose is not to dispense free legal advice, especially because you're coming from Canada and our audience is from around the world, including Canada. But I think more to lend sort of like a human element to your practice. But before we get in there, do you want to just tell us a bit, tell our audience a bit about yourself?
Sure. You kind of gave a lot of the background, but I'm 44. I am born and bred in Toronto. I got married when I was 23. I got 5 kids. The first one was born when we were in school together in law school.
That.
And then the second one, as I was becoming articling, which is a Canadian thing, an apprenticeship before you get admitted to the bar. And then I have 3 boys, 2 girls, and I opened up my practice. I've been practicing since 2005, but really opened up my own in 2007, 2008. And you haven't asked me how I got into family law, but I'll wait for that question.
That's my next question. That's my next question.
Okay.
So it was just happenstance, divine providence, however you want, whichever way you look at it. I went on my own when I went on my own looking for a job. I was with KPMG. I went on my own and I was working for a receiver who was handling.
Sorry, not a lawyer. What's a receiver?
Oh, they handle bankruptcy. So there's different types of bankruptcies. So they handle the dealing of the monies that come in and getting them to the creditors. So they needed a lawyer to sue on lease agreements that weren't being paid, vehicle lease agreements. So they wanted to hire an independent lawyer instead of farming it out to law firms because it was cheaper. So I was a young guy, I was hungry, so they hired me, gave me a salary. But what was nice is I was able to, I had lawsuits against, I was all of a sudden managing hundreds of lawsuits, some of which against very senior lawyers, because some of the people that were on the other ends of the lease agreements were very successful business persons, and they had the lawyer that they had was a big guy downtown, was their buddy who handled their corporate work and said, look, you need to take care of this for me. So I all of a sudden found myself in cases with heavy hitters. I was a young lawyer. Somehow I had one family law case. I don't know how. I was on the legal aid panel. I was on the legal aid panel that I joined actually years before. I didn't really use didn't really use legal aid or take legal aid cases, but somehow I had one family law case, and the work from the receivership was drying up as it was supposed to. And I went to court, and I was up against a lawyer by the name of Alan Goldstein on the other side. We had a case together. And after court, and maybe on the way to court, I saw on the building next to the courthouse was his name. Alan Goldstein, family lawyers.
He's got the best location, by the way, Barry. I just for our audience, I used to, before I moved to the Middle East, I used to have a law firm specializing in small claims court. And Alan's office is right at the corner across the street from the small claims office. And I used to, and I know it sounds funny talking about small claims, but it was a very niche area that I had. And I used to salivate at that location because you can't miss it, right? You can't miss it.
Right. But COVID changed it all. Like, I don't even know what's going on with small claims really now. I mean, if it's in person or still, the location means a lot less now.
Right.
In any event, I finished my, I finished court, and I went over to him and I said, look, I said to myself, this guy is right here. I mean, so I said to him, maybe you have some criminal work for me. Like I'm in my head, I knew I had 2 kids or 3 kids at home at the time, maybe 2. And I was like, I gotta provide for them. And this guy's right here. He's obviously got a business. He's got a business going on. Maybe he has some work to refer to me. I said, and I did a couple of criminal files before. So I asked him if he had any criminal. I didn't want to have the audacity to ask him for family work because He's a family law office. So he said, call me. So I took his card and I called him. Actually, I remember sitting on my dining room or my living room couch, and I called him, and he essentially said to me, look, I have a lot of overflow work, and I can refer you work. He says, look, you're new to this area. I said to myself, it's litigation. It's civil litigation. It's a branch of it. I'll do it. And that was it. I had to hire a clerk, and I started out, and the rest is history. So that's how I got into it.
Cool. Did you always want to be a lawyer?
Oh, sorry, Ben. Yeah.
No, did I?
Yeah, really. You were like the
did I or
argumentative
my
kid
parents?
as a child. I don't know. You know, like
Nah,
some
no.
people are like, that guy's gonna be a lawyer.
No,
Right.
I don't think so. I think it was important to my parents that I have that I have a direction and I have a plan, right? You know, in our community, typically people get married and have kids, and you know, traditional. Yeah, the women do work, of course. Sometimes both parents work equally, but very often the male is the primary caregiver. No, excuse me, primary breadwinner. So it's normal for guys to have a plan. So you know, it's a natural extension is to be a professional. So it was an option, but no one ever looked at me and said, "Yeah, that guy's going to be a killer a litigator." No.
Yeah. In fact, by the way, you have a joint degree, right? You have both a law and a business degree. You have an MBA.
Yeah.
Right? Wow.
Yeah, I have an MBA degree. So again, Jordan knows this. Growing up together, we had a lot of friends who went to school. We went to school together with, and a lot of guys. Some guys showed interest and got into a JD MBA degree. And after I took my LSAT, I said, you know what? Why not go for it? And I did really well in my GMAT, and I got into a joint program, which was great.
You know, it's funny, by the way, you talk about, you know, Ben asked a question about whether or not, you know, Barry was born to be a litigator. The way I got my job, Barry knows this well. I was also at the time married with one child. Actually, Barry's oldest and my oldest are a couple of weeks apart, which is, and they still remain friends to this day, which is amazing. And I just literally took the first job that was offered to me. I needed, like you were saying, I felt I needed to provide for my family.
Right.
I didn't exactly, score straight A's in law school.
Right.
I didn't even know. I didn't. Right. Well, people do, but not you and I.
No.
Which goes to show you how important grades are all the time, because you've done quite well for yourself. But the funny thing is, I literally did not know what litigation meant. I'm kind of embarrassed to say that, kind of proud, but they went there and said, we do commercial litigation, which for our audience essentially means courtroom fighting for business disputes. I didn't even know that at the time. And they're like, do you want to be a litigator? I'm like, yeah, of course. And
I think most people just think of criminal law when they're young.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's okay. It's like Kim Kardashian, who said she went to the White House for a meeting about like criminal justice reform, and they said the DOJ and like all these other initials, and she had to like text her lawyer what was the DOJ. So you're not alone, Yoel.
Yeah, so you're comparing me to Kim Kardashian. That's wonderful, Ben.
I just did.
I'll take the positives out of that. In any case, so but let me ask you. I mean, litigation is a pretty it's by definition, it's a confrontational profession. Obviously, there are some lawyers that are more collaborative than others. I think you would fall under the more collaborative approach. While at the same time, obviously, if you have to be tough for a client, of course, you'll do that. Family law, I find, is sort of even more confrontational in many ways, unfortunately, with how personal lives get entangled. Did you ever think about that before you got into family law? Like, oh my God, what am I getting myself involved in? Or that wasn't really a factor for you?
No, it wasn't. So you said the reason. You said it. I take my responsibility to make a living seriously, and if my dad ever watches this podcast, I'll like it. Look, I grew up with, and so did you actually, Jordan. You grew up with a father who was, worked hard, was a provider. That's the bottom line. So if it was something that I despise, then okay, that's something else. I don't know if I could be an engineer, but I don't even know do I know what they
You
do? I
can't.
think
There
I
you
know.
can. If you engineer a bridge, I'm not going on
I
it.
know exactly. So I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So the answer is I didn't really think about it, but it family law is very real. And sometimes we bring this up at the firm, not to contrast or say something bad about another area of law, but corporate law has a very cool ring to it, and people always want to go into it. But from what I understand, most of what they do is very much, especially the junior lawyers, they review documentation. That's boring, like to do that most of the day. Family law, sure, there's a sad element to it, but you're dealing with real people and real problems and relatable problems. You have a fight on the hockey court, on the playground, you try to resolve the dispute. I mean, again, you're dealing with real human issues. So it just makes it easier in that sense, more relatable and easier. So I think that it fits me well, better than it fits my personality better than actually reviewing documentation for most of the day. I mean, you do that as a family lawyer. But I'm going to jump because you said something that a lot of people think, which I find to be not 100% accurate. You said that is a more the disputes are heavier and greater than civil litigation. I find for the most part that family lawyers are less litigious than most of the civil litigation lawyers I've dealt with. But sometimes the disputes can be hotly contested, and when they are, they very much are. But for the most part, the lawyers and the system is set up here in Ontario, but I believe in other jurisdictions as well, to get people to settle. So yes, in small claims court, they have the settlement conference, and mandatory. And they have mandatory mediation in civil litigation, but family court, you start a case, you get assigned, or you have, depending on which courthouse, or you schedule what's called a conference. It's a first case thing you schedule with a judge. Civil litigation, you sue someone, they put in a defense, there's examinations for discovery, or for an American who's watching this, a deposition. You go to trial, fine, maybe there's mandatory mediation at some point. But family law, there's actually court dates that are set up to have a conference with the judge, where the judge, I tell my clients, sometimes puts on their mediation hat and tries to resolve it. So that is the approach that the judicial system, or the family law rules and the system takes towards family law. So that rather than we're going in with guns blazing.
No, it's okay. That's an interesting way of looking at it. From the conversation I've had, it's more of the system's overworked and the court doesn't want to make any decisions, so they just keep pushing it off to other people.
No, not in Ontario. The court doesn't want to make decisions. I don't think so. The 98% of cases settle before trial, but
I was going to ask you about that. You find that more cases, like, you rarely will go to trial, do you find?
Yeah, I've done trials, many trials. We have what's called mini trials over the years, sure. And I probably am lucky in the sense that when I started, many of my cases were quote unquote simpler cases, so they went to mini trials. So I've experience with that. But you'll find many lawyers for years never went to trial. It's too expensive. Family law cases often settle because you're taking money out of the kids' mouths to fund your lawyer. Judges always tell that to clients, right?
Right. I've heard that said before. Like, a lot of times when one spouse takes another spouse to court, really what they're doing is effectively they're really harming the children. I'm not advocating for or saying that there's never a time where somebody may have a legitimate, complaint or issue to bring to the court. I'm not saying that, but oftentimes there are many cases that if somebody took a sort of, broader view and took a step back and said, okay, what am I doing here? Ultimately, I'm just hurting my kids. Is that fair?
Yeah, big time for sure. It's fair.
Right. And I feel the odd one out as the not lawyer, but I don't
Ben,
know.
if we discuss YouTube and podcasting and authoring books, then we'd Barry and I would be the odd ones out. But anyway, yeah.
It's true, but here we are. There's a saying, the only ones that benefit from a divorce law case is the lawyers, right? So
Yeah,
you have these people that, sometimes they start cordially, and then the lawyer says, no, say this, say that, and you'll get this and you'll get that. And then it bumbles up from there. And then what could have been a simple thing turns into something much crazier. But it sounds like you don't really have that going on in Canada. Maybe it's just because Canadians are so
sure.
much nicer than normal people.
I'm dealing with cases. There's a couple cases that are, so I have cases where, and it's funny because this isn't even a custody battle. It's the couple, even the lawyers, I cannot, every document that comes in, I review with a fine tooth comb, and it's a, it keeps you on your toes. Like you can't take anything for granted. It's like no one trusts anybody. The judges get frustrated because there's such a lack of trust. Of course it exists, but for the most part, the goal is to encourage settlement. It's to encourage settlement. I think as opposed to civil litigation, it's not.
There's a winner and a loser.
It's not the goal. Society,
Yeah.
the government, the House of Commons, who create, like Queen's Park, that creates these rules. There's a strong interest in family law cases settling. Society doesn't want families to be in dispute. So the rules of court in this jurisdiction, I'm sure others, are created to encourage settlement.
I'm curious, Barry, because I can understand on the one part when you talk about litigation, regular commercial litigation, business disputes, in certain ways being harder to resolve, not being structured in the same way. But it seems like in a family dispute, there's so much at stake. For example, you're talking about something more than money. Somebody's, for example, like you said, a custody battle. So how do you get, let's say, a dad who's fighting for, every square inch of, so to speak, of getting access to his children to say like, well, we got to sit down and settle this. Like, you're not talking about settling, $1 million, which obviously is significant. You're talking about settling, meaning,
lives,
something that deals with his children, lives, settling lives. How do you navigate that?
Well, the other side's also true. The other side of it is that let's say it's the mother is told, her lawyer is, or a judge would tell the other side, you need to be more generous. Let's assume the mother, the child.
Just for
there's an
argument's sake,
assumption there, right?
Yeah.
No, not that it always happens. I'm sure you'll get to that in your questions, but not that it always happens. But
right.
They're told you can't. You got to be more flexible. Don't get me wrong. Cases go to trial and motions, but it's excuse me for using an example to prove that it's common, that is commonly said. There's no divorce is recession proof, right? Because people will argue and litigate. I'm just saying it often settles before trial. So do civil litigation cases, but it is hotly disputed, but there's a sense to push for settlement. That's all.
It is the most hotly. I'm chomping at the. I have so many questions, and so Ben, just cut me off if I'm not letting you get a word in edgewise. But
stop apologizing.
I'm Canadian. Would you say that, Barry? Would you say that
you're dual
is the Okay, cut that out, Ben. Would you say that the most?
I wasn't saying you're dual American.
I got it. All right, stop with the disclaimers. Would you say that the most disputed, is there a most disputed issue? Is it custody, for example? Is it child support? Is there one that stands out as the most disputed area within your clients, within your cases?
I would say no. I would say that maybe custody and parenting time is more disputed than the other areas. But it's case dependent. So it's hard to, but I do think that when custody and parenting time is an issue, that's where the emotions are charged.
And how, I know every country, even states, have all their different stuff, at least in the States. Is there a default that where you operate, kind of how they deal with custody and support? Is there
Sure.
kind of
So
like,
yeah. So custody means decision making in Canada. Okay,
okay,
that's what it means. It means decision making for major decisions. They actually recently removed the term from the legislation because people associate it with something that it's not. Main parent, that's the way I define it. The other,
yeah,
but it's not. There's no default with respect to custody. With respect to child support, we have a table. So like 20 years ago, give or probably take a couple of years, the government instituted the child support guidelines, and it sacrificed accuracy for efficiency. And they said, okay, if you make 80 grand a year and this guy makes 80 grand a year and you're paying this much support, there's an exception called the undue hardship, but it's very rare. And it just makes it easier because support is very important that it gets paid. So the government wants to make it easy for the recipient to get it. Because you asked me, I hope that answers your question.
sort of. I guess let's go scenario wise. Let's say two parents working fine. They're both working. They're making the same, give or take, money. They both want shared custody, decision making, and shared time with the kids. But, is that what the court would say, or they want you to agree on it on your own? Like, is there one party in that scenario that's has to work harder to prove that they're worthy of what they want? Is it jaded one way or the other?
No. So the answer is again, disclaimer: I'm not giving legal advice, and I'm looking at through the lens of an Ontario Canadian lawyer. But
and neither are Ben and I.
there's something called the maximum contact principle in Canada and Ontario, I should say, Ontario. That the goal is that there should be maximum contact with both parties. I'm going to give you what I tell many of my clients when it comes up, a long spiel about this now, to assist in people understanding some myths on family law or on the law. So that's the goal. So the gold standard is there should be 50-50 shared parenting, shared custody. Okay. More often than not, I believe that doesn't happen simply because one parent lives in, Ben, where are you from? If I may ask.
Let's just say Jersey.
Okay. So one parent lives in Newark and the other parent lives in Passaic. Okay. So they live in different cities. So you can't have 50-50 because the kid's got to go to school somewhere. So very often, unless in order for the 50-50 equal parenting time to work, typically they have to live in the same area. There has to be a high integrate. They have to get along pretty well for them to not necessarily, but live in the same area. Typically, it's just not in the children's best interest. Not just like typically, but very often it's not in the children's best interest for them to be equal with both parents. It just doesn't work for the kid's schedule. But the gold standard that's the gold standard. Now, is it harder for the man? No. The law, per the legislation, the law is gender neutral. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a lady. But let's take this one step further. Most of the time, or almost all the time, a lady has a child. She can't work the next day. So the kid needs things. The child needs diapers, etc. I know who goes to work? The dad. And the child's often nursing. So 3 months later, the kid's nursing, dad's working, mom's taking care of the kid, and they split up. What happens? You think the child is the child going to go with the dad? Well, the child's nursing. I mean, this is just one example. So take it one step further. So it's not that the law is against men. It's just that the nature of the world is that men don't have babies. So therefore, very often, the mother is the primary caregiver, especially when they're infants and newborns and babies. Again,
Sure.
it's not that the dad's a poor parent. It's just
Sure.
what happens.
I understand, in those beginning years, but once you're past the beginning years.
Yeah, right. 100%. So again, and just so you know, I don't have to say this. I'm just telling you what I see from experience, and I don't think it's a novel. I don't think anybody's surprised here. But for sure. So that as time goes, if a father wants, what I tell my clients very often, many cases, a client wants 50% and wants shared parenting, and it's all other things being equal, for sure, 100%, and that's doable. And the courts order it. The courts want it. Judges want both parents to have maximum contact.
I was going to ask you about that,
Yeah.
Barry. Would you say that that's the way of the court trying to advocate for the children? In other words, I just actually forwarded this to Ben. I saw a clip from Jordan Peterson.
People having to stay married if they have children. I mean, we are
Yes,
two
it's better
divorced
if
men
they
here.
do. It's better if they do.
It's
better for the
I think
children.
most people would agree that that's the best. But as far as I understand, do you think that the laws should say that we have to stay together?
Oh, it isn't obvious to me that the liberalization of the divorce laws in the 60s was for everyone's best interest. Now, exactly what that means, I'm not sure. But we do know that stable, intact, two-parent families are better for children. So, it depends on who you put first.
Discussing the idea of children really being the ones who are kind of lost in all of this. There's really no advocate for the children.
But isn't that an individual choice and not something the law should decide?
Well, it depends to some degree on whether the law should advocate for children. I mean, children really can't speak for themselves, can they? They need some authority to speak for them. And so we do know, like data, for example, on child welfare indicates crystal clear that children from intact two-parent families do better on virtually every measure that you can possibly imagine. But I'm not advocating draconian measures to keep people together who don't want to be together.
And so would you say that this is the court's attempt or legislation, whoever, at trying to advocate for the children who don't otherwise have a voice?
So there is something we have in Ontario, the Office of the Children's
Office of the Children's Lawyer, right? I remember that.
But no, I find that judges are very, very pro it. Very. They're very pro maximum equal parenting time when it's appropriate. So when it's appropriate. So if you're going to court and the kid's been living with their dad for 5 years, and then the mother says, "Hey, I want more access. I want 50%, and I want it next week." Well, no judge is going to order that. So it depends on the circumstance. But if it's a breakup that starts when the kids are young and then both parents are involved, why not?
Right.
Is there an average age of, like, for your clients? Like, is there a demographic that you find? Like, is it mostly people in their 30s or 40s, or is it like all over the place type of thing?
It's all over.
You get people in their 60s, for example, after 40 years of marriage or whatever the case is.
Yeah, that's rare. No, that's rare. I agree with you on that. Up until the 50s is more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then into the 60s, you don't see it as much.
Mm-hmm. And obviously you act for both. Sorry, Ben, you were going to ask something, I think.
I was just watching some things and, family lawyers giving advice like, hey, you want to have 50-50 with your kid? Then you need to be involved with that kid's life. Dad, be involved with that kid's life. Go to his appointments. Go do this, do that, do this. And I was just watching it and thinking, a lot of the times the dads are working umpteen hours so that the kid can go to the doctor. The kid can have medical. The kid is taken care of. The kid has food. And then the fact that he isn't going to those appointments is being held against them. And to me, it was such a it was such a weird advice to give, because you can't go back in time with the situation that you made with your partner to, hey, I don't know, maybe I'll get divorced one time, so I'm gonna change everything I do and we'll earn less money and I'll not have a stable job because I need to leave all the time to go to appointments. It just sounded
Right.
very strange to me.
I agree with you. That it shouldn't be that I don't believe that's a major factor in determining whether there should be equal parenting time. But again, it depends on the family structure. So I often tell my clients, well, you don't want to sacrifice your career. Depends why you want the equal parenting time, right? It has to be altruistic, but you don't want to
Sure.
if you don't, a person's career. I'm not a social worker. I tell my client, but if a person's career is important, and they do well, they're happier. By extension, you'll be a better parent, you'll be happier and a better parent. If you feel like I want to get 50%, then you don't accelerate as an attorney because of it. Well, you have to really ask yourself, is that what's best for the kid? Is that what you want? Maybe it's best for the kid that you have one day less, but you're also able to you're able to feel better about yourself and grow as a professional. So and the other side, let's say, works a little less. You have to see you have to determine what you think's best. But to answer your question specifically, I don't think any judge would say, oh no, because you didn't attend doctor's appointments, you're not an equal caregiver. No.
Okay. All right. Because I have heard of like social workers asking, oh, what's your, kid's favorite
Right.
color? What's your this? What's your that? And,
Right.
the role of a husband or a partner during the marriage can completely change because there is no partner and they step up. So
Yeah.
again, I know
And-
you're only familiar in your area, but I feel like not all courts operate the way that you're explaining.
Look, in Ontario, I forget the name of the act. You can Google it after. There used to be in the 1970s an act called, I think, the Mother and Young Child Act, or Tender Years Act or something. And actually, I think the act became unenforceable like in 1978 or something. But it basically said that any child under the age of 2 by default has to be with their mother if there's a separation. I mean, but it could be other jurisdictions are different. There is, right.
Sorry,
I mean,
I think in Israel, if I'm not mistaken, and again, none of us are giving legal advice, but I'm pretty sure there's something to the 6-year-old cutoff age, if I'm not mistaken. So and Israel is also a common law, system, just like Ontario is in that sense. So I'm not saying all the laws are the same, but I think Israel has something similar in terms of those tender years, as you were saying.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw this, but an article just came out that a dad in Ecuador who is going through a divorce actually legally changed his gender to a woman.
Yes.
Do you have any comments on that?
No, I put it on my status on WhatsApp yesterday. I
Yeah.
saw that. But I
I haven't checked your status in a while.
I don't know what to. I don't know what to say about that. I mean,
would you say that there are some places that are, the man has a harder time fighting for rights?
well, I think from people from the Middle East who come here, if I recall correctly, they've come from countries where it's assumed. Actually, no, the opposite. I think under Sharia law, a father automatically has custody of a child. I know that may sound surprising, but I'm going to try to make a little distinction and point here. I tell this to my clients on consults. There's law and fact, right, Jordan? We learn in law school. There's the law and the fact. So the law is gender neutral. What are the facts? So statistically, again, I have to say this because I'm a lawyer. This is just what I see as a lawyer. And I think every lawyer would see it. The facts are very often, more often than not, the mother, female is doing more of the caregiving role to the children, and especially when they're younger, and therefore when they separate, that's just a natural extension of it. So the law will look at what's in the best interest of the children, and again, it's very, for a dad that again, using the male female dynamic, if a person is seeking equal parenting time, shared parenting, it's there for the taking. But very often someone who's used to working is very happy seeing the children on a weekends and sometimes during the week. That you see that. So it's not that this is where I talk strongly with clients. It's not that the law is against, let's say, the men. It's that this is what they're used to, working full time or beyond full time. They're happy with it. So you think, 80% of the time men are not the primary caregiver. It's not that the law is against them. So for men that want,
Sorry, go ahead.
For men that it's there to, and nobody, and no lawyer in their right mind would write that to another lawyer. Oh, this is the mother. She's the mother and the primary caregiver. I saw it a couple of times this year. I was like, I can't believe this lawyer just wrote that to me. Like, it doesn't work like that. And I've seen lawyers inexperienced, or they came from a different jurisdiction, and they've said that to judges. Like, my client is the mother, and the judge is like, I don't. So what?
Oh, wow.
But I'm curious, because it seems to me, I don't know about Ontario, that the courts, and I'm not saying they should, but the courts don't really get involved in people's personal lives, right? But if you're going to talk about the law and then the facts, well, what if you have a facts? And again, I'm just using an example based on what we've been talking about. It could go both ways. But what if you have a fact scenario where, yes, the mother was a primary caregiver, and at the same time, she's living this lifestyle of, and assuming it could be demonstrated, it could be evidenced in court, there was adultery, there's, late night partying, she's not around a lot, she's, pawning the kids off on babysitters, that type of thing. But the courts won't even look at that, because the courts are going to say, we're not getting into people's personal lives. But doesn't the court have to, in a certain sense, do that if they're actually going to look at the facts?
Yeah, so they do get into, whether what their real personal lives, no, but if they're pawning off the kids, yeah, for sure, then it should go to the other parent, for sure. They do. So 100%. So that's where disputes. So if a parent, if it can be, and courts will make orders, putting the kids in the care of the other parent during that time, or the other parent getting primary care, for sure.
Will people get private investigators involved?
Oh yeah, people do that.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And these mini court things that you talk about, is it witnesses refuting? Like, if one partner says something and the other one wants to have their lawyer call somebody up to call them out as a liar.
Yeah, so I'll tell, family law is replete with this. I mean, this guy has a witness saying that he's the primary caregiver, and she has a witness saying she is, and her witness says that he disregarded the children, and his witness says she disregarded the children.
So
talk about disputes. That's where family law probably takes the cake. Everybody gets their neighbor, their friend to say something.
So, but this is a general question. I've always had this issue personally with regard to business disputes, because I always used to say one of the things that was very difficult for me was that you never really knew which side was right. There's the saying, the truth is somewhere in the middle, whatever that means. I don't know what I think of that, but so do you ever think for yourself, you're advocating for, and this is more general question, I guess, for attorneys, but do you ever think you're advocating for one side, not necessarily knowing, like, maybe what the mom, I keep doing it. It could be you're representing the mom or the dad, the other party, there may be merit to that. Is that something?
Maybe merit to what?
Do you have to grapple with the idea that, you have to advocate for your client's position? and there could be merit to what the other side is saying, and you're advocating for your client. Like you have a case, like you said, where one side says, I'm the primary, and the other one's saying, how do you know who's telling the truth? Like, how do you reconcile that?
It comes up. I think every litigator has to deal with that. But that isn't that one of the 10 commandments of the oath we take as being a lawyer, that you're an advocate for your client. And if you can't do that, then don't become a lawyer, or don't litigate.
That's one of the reasons I don't anymore.
Right.
But that's a whole rabbit hole. I don't want to bring you down that.
Right. No, I know. That's that. I mean, that people sometimes ask me, how do you handle family law? I mean, how do you isn't it? Don't you go to bed at night thinking about it? Not really. Certainly there's some cases that we think about, but that's your job as a lawyer.
And that's a good segue, because I wanted to ask you, you mentioned, this is interesting to me because you mentioned that the cases are relatable. So I wanted to know what you mean by that, because thank God it's not relatable to you in the sense that you're happily married, thank God, a stable family. I know your family very well. And, people are coming to you with, unfortunate situations of family and marital breakdown. So when you say relatable, what do you mean by that from your perspective?
Oh, so it's an easy answer.
My questions are hard hitting, Barry. What can I say?
No, it's a human, because it's a human, it's
not a document.
It's not a document. You're dealing with human beings. It's like trying to negotiate between two people. So it's relatable. We do it every day. So that's why I gave the example. I tell my clients also, it's like when you play hockey on the playground, the other team has they got better picks, and then you argue and you trade back and forth. So again, it's just part of the different, as humans, this is what we do. We negotiate. So you're dealing with people in dispute and you try to negotiate. But I don't want you to think it's all rosy. It's not. I mean, there are cases that are hotly contested. Don't get me wrong, big time. And clients sometimes get really, really fired up. Also, it's because you're dealing with emotions. But it's relatable. That's
right. Oh, sorry, Ben. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm glad to hear, that the mini court actually lets defending and things like that. I know in this country, it's not really that. I can tell you, I saw the judge for literally 10 minutes, and that was it. And the rest was social worker, lawyers, whatever. And so, you expect to go in there and have a voice, and there really was no voice, which was frustrating. And it's good to hear. But I feel like in other places, it's a little more similar. Personally, and I don't know if you listened to the previous episodes, but I actually remember being 5 years old and the judge sitting in the courtroom and the judge asking me who I wanted to live with. And during my own divorce, like that was my only goal was to prevent that situation. That was it. Just not have my kids go through that. So I know, now I don't know if I don't know if that's a common thing from the judge, but at least the social workers are having those conversations. So the kids are understanding what's going on. Maybe it would have been a little easier if it was a social worker and not the judge in the big courtroom. Like I remember literally sitting in the box, like, who do you want to live with? But that, to me, shielding my kids from that was my entire goal.
Once in a while, I've had it very, very seldom, but a judge will speak to a child in chambers. But usually they're older kids. It has to be with the permission and with the parents, but that's not the deciding factor. But by the way, just to segue back to one thing you asked me before about what happens when you in layperson's terms, you kind of asked me what happens if your client, you think it's not in the best interest what your client's proposing, and you're supposed to be an advocate for him or her. So I have conversations with clients where I'm like, that's not best for the kid to do what you're suggesting. That's ridiculous. She's not wrong. And then Sure, I do, and I bet you any good family lawyer will tell their client. But if the client says to you, "This is what I want," then I'll tell the other side, "This is what he wants. These are his instructions." But you'll do that with them.
Hmm. And does anybody come into you and uncertain if they want to get divorced and they want to know their options? Does that happen?
Well, I'm not a therapist,
Their
but
legal, no, I mean their legal
yeah,
options, not their marital options, but
right.
their, yeah. In other words, like, do you find? I'll give you an example. Ben mentioned a previous podcast. I also mentioned this on a previous podcast. When I met, I ended up having two different lawyers, but the first lawyer I met, when I went to him for that first meeting, he had spent 45 minutes talking to me about why divorce doesn't make sense, and in this case, and
Yeah.
if you could hang on for another 5 to 10 years, you'll begin to the grandparent stage. Your kids are already older, and I mean, essentially, he was singing to the choir. I knew that, but it wasn't my decision. So I'm just curious: do you ever find, you're not a social worker? I get it, but I found it, not that I had gone to this lawyer for that, but I found it refreshing that here was a lawyer who actually does this work, but he's not interested in just pushing me into something that he felt should be avoided if it can at all costs. So I'm just curious, like, if you ever find yourself listening to somebody and you're thinking, like, what are they doing here? Or, like, you tell them, like, before you get into this, you should know, like, this is not fun. This is not the solution to all your life's problems, type of thing.
Yeah, so for sure, it seldom happens, but it does happen sometime. It's happened when, I'm just thinking about cases, but it's happened where I've said to clients, like, you're making a mistake. Like, you shouldn't do this. Yeah, for sure, it happens. But most of the time, when people are coming to a lawyer, that's done ski.
They've made up their mind.
Yeah, it's like they're at the lawyer stage already.
Right.
But I mean, but I sometimes counsel clients the other way. Some people are just going through a separation and they're not divorced. They haven't made up their mind. And I've said, look, I ain't a social worker or a rabbi or a priest, but, like, you're going to stick around with this person. Like, it doesn't make it doesn't make sense. Like, because a lot of times people feel that they have to because they have children or societal pressure, but it's like, I mean, there's verbal or physical abuse or, drugs or cheating. It's like, it just, sometimes the circumstance, you need a lawyer to be objective and be like, 1 second, this isn't, to me, it doesn't make sense. But again, go speak to your rabbi or priest.
And your practice, does it consist of, I guess, I mean, it's obviously not gender specific, but yeah. But, like, do you happen to have, just based on referrals or whatnot, because, I assume, a lot of guys will refer other guys their family lawyer, and women will refer their friends, their lady friends, their family. And of course, guys could refer women and women guys, but do you find, based on referrals or whatnot, you've got, like, a more leaning towards one just by happenstance, or it's kind of no stats on that? Down the road, you represent both sides.
Just like there's 50% men, 50% women, it doesn't equal.
Interesting.
Yeah. 100%.
So
Okay.
There's something I find interesting about, I guess, marriage contracts in general. Like, I don't know many contracts, and I'm not a lawyer again, that you can enter into, and let's say you open a business, but if someone breaks the contract, they are privy to half of everything that was ever gotten from that contract. I find it very strange to me.
Sorry, what? So I didn't.
That you enter into a marriage, essentially, in theory, you think it's going to be for the rest of your life.
Oh, you're talking about a marriage contract. Okay, yeah. Okay.
And then one of the parties decides.
I was thinking,
nope.
Like a lawyer, like marriage contract. Yeah.
So then one of the parties is like, all right, forget it, I'm done, but I'm taking half of everything with me. To me, it's very strange. I don't know of any other business contract that you would enter into where that's the outcome, where there's no penalty by breaking this contract that essentially is never supposed to be broken.
Great. I have an answer. The answer is better than the question. As they
Okay,
taught us in Talmud class, but the opposite, right? The question is usually better than the answer. But in this case, the answer is better than the question. And I hope with this, people ask it typically in a different way than you do, but the answer is very fair. She cheated on me. I found out for the past 5 years, and you're making $1 million a year, and you find out your wife is cheating on you, okay? And he's like, I have to pay spousal support. We were married for 25 years. Our kids are older. I mean, it's a textbook case for alimony, and the law is you have to pay. So why is it fair? Or putting it into the framing it the way you said it. We entered into this contract. Why do I have to? I want out, but why do I have to pay 50%? She broke a fundamental principle term of the contract. Fine. Fair question. And I'm not condoning it. Look, as you can see, I'm a religious person. I keep the 10 Commandments. You can't commit adultery, but the court doesn't go behind the law is that the court doesn't get behind closed doors. Let's say the circumstances were that this person, again, I started with a male and female, so I'm continuing with it. He was abusive physically, verbally. They were different bedrooms for 30 years. And he was financially abusive. And that's why this happened. So those are two different scenarios. So I'm not no, I'm not. The court's condoning is not condoning or not make any judgment one way or the other, but it's there. I'm not God, but there's two. One, the first scenario seems a lot worse than the second one, considering the nature of the relationship. So the answer to the question is, why was it broken? Well, not the answer to the question is the law is that the court doesn't that's not a factor in determining how much support or equalization of property someone should get. But the reasoning behind it, I believe, is a better answer than the question. It makes sense. We don't know why people break up, and that's not the laws. That's not society or the court system's role. The role is to make rules around marriage and common law relationships. The example I gave you was to demonstrate why I think the law is correct and makes sense, because we don't know why people break up. And if the court starts getting into the weeds with one relationship and it opens up a whole floodgates. And then this person does get spousal support because the spouse cheated on them, and the other one doesn't get spousal support even though the spouse cheated on them because the circumstances surrounding it. I hope that answers your question a bit.
No, but there are.
I think you're.
Go ahead.
I think when there are kids involved, you're taking out the concept and statistics that 2 parents is a better situation than 1 parent, and the law favors. The law doesn't take into any of those things, but it makes it much easier for someone to say, all right, I'm done. And I'm breaking up this thing that's best for my children. And I have a way out. If it doesn't work out, I'm entering into this thing, but I have a way out that if it doesn't work out, I'll just go and I'll get half.
What do you mean? But see, that's the thing. I just assumed you were asking for half of the money, not half of the kids.
Everything. Like,
yeah.
I think the law is not pro.
Well, you can't. What if that person? What if that person who said that they were going to leave is someone who's physically abused?
That's where the court comes in. There are exceptions.
Okay, so there may be I hear what you're saying. Maybe there's jurisdictions, possibly in the United States, where those things come into play.
I mean, I know there is definitely at least
it's dangerous
one state. Well, there's one state where I think the husband can sue the person that your spouse cheated with.
Yeah.
It's just I'm just gonna weigh in here also because I hear the question and I hear the answer, and I think that's what Barry's getting at. Not to put words in your mouth, it really is a slippery slope because
Yeah, slippery slope.
I look, I've been there. I know where Ben's question is coming from. At the same time, as a lawyer, I could put on my lawyer's hat, and I understand where Barry's answering the question. Like, it's really hard for the court to start saying like we're going to police people. Like, it could bring us back to an age where we're kind of policing people and taking away people's civil liberties. It's kind of like that Peterson clip I sent you, Ben, where he was saying like, what's best for the children? I'm going to tell you an intact family is definitely best for the children. But Peterson also said, I'm not advocating for keeping people in a marriage against their will. And it's kind of a balance of, are we going to, yes, I can understand there's sort of an idea of not incentivizing people to just leave and be able to get half, as you put it. I mean, we're all simplifying here, but at the same time, are we going to make it so difficult for someone that it becomes a terror to try and get out of that marriage? That could be really difficult for that physically abused woman or man, because physical abuse could go both ways, for example. So it's really a balance. It's really, really complicated. It's not an easy thing it's a balance for the courts, right?
I feel that the system isn't balanced. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, it could be it's not balanced, but I think what Barry, what you would say is that that's what the court's trying to do, even if it's, I'm not saying you're saying this, but even if, Ben, you're saying it's not actually doing a good job of it, but it's
I understand.
kind of.
So Barry, once it gets to you, you try to make the most balanced outcome. I'm trying to say there should be more done before it gets to you, and it should be incentivized.
Well, actually, maybe I'm not trying to make it balanced because I'm advocating for a client. So if he says to me, I want primary care of the kids, that's my job. I guess, I'm sure there's books written about what lawyers are supposed to do if they don't believe what they're.
No, but that's why cases depend on its circumstances, because like you were saying, Barry, people get in private investigators. If there's a situation where somebody's delinquent for whatever reason, it's not necessarily the case that the court isn't going to get involved in someone's life if it means analyzing, what's in the best interests, or even, if a woman's going to try and argue, for example, just using woman because that's the example we've been using. Right. I'm not trying to pick on women, but if a woman's going to argue that, well, I wasn't working full time, I was a caregiver, then it's proven that she's not doing much caring, and she's living with the courts, I think, would find that relevant if they're trying to determine her income and employability and all that sort of thing. So I don't think it's, again, Ben, I'm not saying that you're right or wrong about your views. I'm just saying that I'm just trying to put on my lawyer's hat that I think it is.
Yeah, you're saying after. You guys are focusing on after, and I'm focusing on before.
So what are you saying, Ben?
I'm saying I think just looking at the numbers, the number out there is 70% of divorces are initiated by the woman nowadays. Really? Yeah, nowadays, and from our circles and what we hear from people, that seems to be the going trend.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know why or what or how, but I write poetry, and so I write. So after my divorce, 14 years, 5 kids, I wrote a bunch of stuff down, and one of them is, it's like building a skyscraper, and you get to the last 3 blocks, and then all of a sudden the cement guy says, forget it, I'm out of here, and the whole thing just crumbles. And I think a lot of lawyers, at least, say, hey, you come to them, you'll get this, 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 and this. And lots of, child support, if it's child support, or if it's, you'll get the kids, or you don't have to worry about it. I'm going to get divorced. I'm going to get the kids. I'm going to get a paycheck. Everything's going to be the same. He's just going to be out of the house, and I'll have whatever I want. And I think it's viewed a lot by society and by the circles of these people and the lawyers, saying, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. You get this, this, this. Part of the reason we started this podcast is because there's a lot of support groups for women. There's a lot of lawyers, organizations for women. There's not a lot for men. And a lot of them are just, trying to I moved, we didn't have any savings. I moved into my friend's house for 7 months. So,
Did you have to support all that during that time?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of guys just move into their parents' houses. And the system, I think, it's
Well, you
not
shouldn't have left the
discouraging.
home. Your lawyer should have guided you. Why did you leave the home?
It wasn't even that.
I'm not going to ask you your personal business.
I'm not going to get into it. It wasn't even that.
Yeah.
But it's, you live with someone for a very long time. You just want them to be happy. But
right. So sometimes it's like any partnership or contract. If your partner goes south, if you ended up going into business with your partner that wasn't good, you got to face the music.
Right, but they don't take half by default. By
sure.
default,
If you and I are in a business partnership together, and we were 50-50 after 5 years, and I realize I'm doing most of the work, and we're earning $200,000 a year on it, and we have retained earnings of $200,000, let's say, and we split up. I don't take all of it. No, you're a 50% owner. Take half of it.
Again, right. So again, I said I don't know about other contracts. To me,
but obviously we're not going to sound terse. It's not a contract like that. But
I think I understand what you're getting at, Ben. And again, I empathize because we're in similar. We've gone through similar experience. Everyone's case is different, but I think that if the system was less inclined, let's just say, or a partner was more or let's use the woman as our ongoing example, she was less quote unquote incentivized, then you could have a situation where a woman is scared to leave, and then so they're staying in the marriage, right? So less divorces are happening, right? Because women are initiating less divorces, but they're miserable. So what are we accomplishing? Now, again, you could make the argument that what Peterson says, that an intact family is better for the kids. But as I keep saying, even Peterson himself would say he's not saying that a woman should be made to feel miserable. He was just stating a fact as what's better, intact family or non-intact family. But he wasn't advocating for making a woman or a man feel that they're trapped. And I think if we disincentivize too much, then you have a case where a woman so the marriage is intact. Congratulations, you saved the marriage. But what kind of marriage is it? It's not two happy people. It's one person who just wants to keep it together because he wants to keep it intact, and it's a woman who's miserable and doesn't want to be in this marriage. You understand? So it's not so simple just to say there's too many incentives for women. And again, I'm not saying the system is not necessarily skewed or whatnot. I don't want to make a comment about that at this point. I'm just saying I can understand why, you can't just say women should be less disincentivized, because I don't know if that makes for a healthy situation either. Would you agree, Barry?
No, you make a great point, right? So that if a person isn't guaranteed support, or they're scared that they won't leave, and that's probably what happens in insular communities and in areas of the world where they don't have division of property and automatic and support based on income, where they start looking at the relationship and behind closed doors, and then people won't leave if they're not guaranteed certain quote unquote rights or financial.
Right. Well,
by the way, it still exists that people sometimes stay in a relationship because they never worked, and they won't have access to, they won't be able to make it. That's another whole bowl of fish. Even if they will get spousal support or alimony, they can't afford a lawyer, so they just stick it out because they can't afford a lawyer to get it. Yeah.
Right. In other words, what I would say is, as painful as my own personal story is for myself, I did not want to get divorced. I don't know that the legal system is the mechanism for keeping more marriages intact. Like, I don't think, it sounds a bit draconian to me to say that the legal system should be there to more disincentivize the party, again, in
Right.
this example, women, I think there are ways that we can, maybe achieve more marital stability. That has to do with education. Maybe nonprofits could be started. I wish everybody would read Michael Singer's Living Untethered, for example. I'm not saying I have the solution. It just doesn't sound to me that the legal system is necessarily the solution to keep
It's not.
marriages intact.
Right. And we're here when someone comes to a lawyer, they're in a legal battle usually,
Right.
or they're doing a cohabitation agreement, which is different.
Right. Right. But I do understand the sentiment, having been there, of how difficult it is, for me as a man, and I don't want to put words in Ben's mouth, but to see things crumble and for things to play out the way they often do, it's definitely very painful. I'm not discounting that at all. Ben, how I feel. I'm not discounting what you're saying.
Yeah, I just feel like
philosophically discussing
the kids the kids are getting the short end of the stick most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But again, like why I keep mentioning Peterson, because I really like what he said. That's true, but that doesn't mean that something should be done to disincentivize somebody from staying into a marriage they don't want to be in. It's not even I don't know if it helps, but it is a question. I see a lot in these articles, especially all these articles are coming out. We saw 4 women are living together, and we don't need to be with men. And there's 2 other women that are, just an article I saw today, we're living together. Literally says in that article, we don't need men. I think, and they're saying how happy they are. And I do consider myself libertarian in many ways, even though I'm, religious, whatever that means. But I think we have to ask ourselves, why is it that this person thinks they have to do this to gain that happiness? Why is it that people feel that, they're saying, I'm not happy? And why is it that they feel that it's because of the marriage? I think that's unfortunately a huge mistake. And Singer talks a lot about that in Living Untethered. Like, if we think that if we just, change our circumstance, get a new spouse, get a new car, a new home, a new this, a new that, that's going to change everything. That's going to make for my happiness. That to me is really the problem. And I'm not saying I'm,
I just had this conversation with my daughter. She goes, yeah. I don't want the fish anymore. I want to get rid of the fish and I want an iguana. It'll make me happy.
Right.
Ish. Yeah. And I was like, see, you need to learn how to be happy without the stuff and be happy with yourself. And then it'll just add to it. It can't be because of the stuff.
That's your next children's book. That's your next children's book. But it's true that to me is a bigger issue. Like, not the legal system. It's more, although it has its frustrations, but it's more like why does somebody feel that changing something is going to bring their happiness? And again, I'm not talking about cases of physical violence or anything like that.
Right.
But,
it won't. I mean, but we're not. Yes, Lord. Right. I'm coming at it.
Bringing it back to Barry. Yeah. Oh, Barry, welcome to the show, Barry.
I'm coming back from the vantage point of a lawyer. So.
Yeah. Anyway, we should be respectful because Barry bills out at about $2,500 an hour or something like that. So
$4,500.
$4,500 an hour.
Canadian.
So yeah, so that's like 200 US.
So, Ben, did you have any kind of like wrap up questions for?
So I do, and I'm going to throw one at you that I'm not sure if you're prepared for. But you are a father of 5, and this is a Too Dad to Quit podcast. So we would like you to share one of those moments where you felt that you were too dad to quit, like the dad. You came in, you got 15 kids on your shoulders, or you were just like, man, I did this and I am awesome.
Like, because I'm a dad?
Yeah. Your dad moment, proudest dad moment. I took away words from a lawyer.
No, because like I'm thinking. I mean, I don't know. No, I mean, because I work. I mean, I'm a dad, so I don't mean I'm a dad. I'm a parent. So they're. Let me think for a minute.
You can think about it. I can throw another question at you.
1 second. Could I think for 30 seconds
Yeah, go for it.
Pause it for 30
As
seconds.
long as you're not billing us, it's fine.
Yeah, 30 seconds to the chair or whatever you say.
Yeah. So I was in my son's school. They had a father and son last Sunday, and he's in Jewish
Father and
schools,
son study
Yeah,
session?
study. Yeah, have services, and at the so there's certain clothing they have to wear at the services. So they have to wear a hat, which for the purpose. You guys are familiar with this, of course, but it's garb that dignified for the purposes of prayer. So he turned around, and I was behind him. And this has happened several times with him. And I looked at him, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm seeing myself. Like, he looks like me. He's a better version, thank God, but he's a better version of me." So I look at him. But so that's not what you're looking for in your
That's
question.
exactly what we're looking for.
You're
That's
looking for
exactly
real
it.
accomplishments. But I look very often with this kid. I look. Yeah, I
You
look
see
at his
your face right now? No,
That's
your
me.
face. Your
Yeah.
face right now when it lit up when you're telling the
Yeah.
story. That's
When
the
I
moment.
saw that, I was laughing. Like he looks like me.
The last thing is, as a family law litigator, attorney, what advice would you give for a father who's about to go into this process? And he knows that he needs to get a lawyer, he needs to figure out, somebody gave me advice where just figure out what you want.
Exactly.
Don't go in there wishy-washy.
That's it, baby. That's exactly it. That's it, baby. I'm saying that so I'm gonna take that to the next level. Jordan's gonna appreciate this.
Yoel, I know it's Yoel, by the way. I haven't corrected you.
Because
That's okay.
I mean, those that know me know that I speak with someone. I say it as it is. I have 3 sisters. I don't have any brothers. Okay, so to me, men and women, there's no such thing. One's better than the other. One's smarter than the other. There's equal. Okay, and all of us grew up in North America, and it's a serious comment. The idea that the whole idea, I tell this to my staff all the time. The whole concept of like the men are, the old school mentality of the men are, above and the men are, they have the corporate jobs and the women, secretaries, like that doesn't even exist in my world. So I say that as a preamble because I'm about to say the following. When a man who's getting divorced, you have to ask yourself, like you just said, what do you want? Do you want 50% of the kids? Because you really want it, or you just want to stick it to her? If you ask most guys, I don't know if they really want 50%. If they like working more of the time and being able to be successful in their career, and they're satisfied with seeing the kids less, it doesn't mean that you're not as equal. It just means you're focused more on the livelihood. So take any traditional home, and most homes around, one parent is working more than the other. That parent's seeing the kids less. Does that mean the kid loves dad less or mom less? No, that's the way the world is. So you have to ask yourself, if you're statistically, the men are usually the primary breadwinner. If you are a successful primary breadwinner and you're happy, and you got a good job and you like going to work and you feel good about yourself and your kids are good, do you just want to stick it to her and get 50%? You could, but if your career is going to suffer, is that a good move? I'd say no. And then I say to my clients, but if you're the type of guy that you're an equal caregiver or a primary caregiver and you're doing most of the work, and I have plenty of clients like that, most of the caregiving work, by all means. And no judge is going to look at you and say, hey, you're a man, you can't get that. Doesn't work like that. So that's and a woman should say the same thing to themselves. But I think very often the men feel that because the women very often think that, they assume they're the primary caregiver, right? That happens very often. They just assume it. And the men they assume that they're not, and they feel they have to compensate for that, but not to a detriment. But again, I feel I have to say this, and I have the same conversation with clients all the time. It doesn't mean, I'm not saying it because I think that men should be working all the time and I should never be the primary caregiver. This is what you see in a legal practice. Most of the time, that's the way when people have kids, especially with young kids, the men are usually primary breadwinners, but it doesn't mean that the law is anti them. Doesn't mean that I'm saying a lawyer believes that the way it should be. No, it just, it's, usually when you have a pain here in your throat, it means it's strep. Usually over here, it doesn't mean it's strep. I'm just giving you the facts of what you see.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really, helping your clients, many of them, see the big picture to the best you can. Like you said, emotions oftentimes get in the way, but I love that question, Ben, and Barry, I love the answer. Like, it's really about, taking a step back, and it's really dual purpose. I mean, this theme has come up in our podcast a lot too. Of course, you look at what's in the best interest of the children, but Ben's question was about advice to guys. So as a guy, it's also important that we take care of ourselves, not turn ourselves into doormats, thinking that we're doing something. We really have to ask ourselves, what are we doing here? Like, what is in the child's best interest, as well as my best interest as a person? Because I've talked a lot about this. Like, being a dad is part of myself, but I don't say it's not my sole identity. Like, there's other facets to me. And I think somebody has to really look at that situation. I think there's also a knee-jerk reaction a lot of men could have, especially because in cases like Ben was saying, if let's say the 70% rate is, let's say it's initiated by the wife, a lot of guys kind of feel, I think they have to and again, I'm not a social worker or psychologist, but I think a lot of guys feel like they have to lash back and they have to sort of prove themselves, and a lot of them, right, Barry, would probably, you may be doing that, not because they actually really want it or feel like they even should be doing it. And again, that could go in both genders, but, just using our example. So I guess that's one of the reasons why you're so successful, that you're able to help.
Who said I'm successful?
Well, I'm definitely projecting, as I have not seen your financial statement. You get to see your clients. They don't get to see yours, but all outward appearances, with that fancy, I don't know what shirt you're wearing over there, but it's a very nice, for those who are listening, it's a very dapper white pressed shirt with a design on it. I don't know what that is.
Starch Fridays.
But in all seriousness, I mean, you've really, it's amazing. You've built an amazing practice. You have a great reputation. You speak very intelligently, and it's clear that you really work to help your clients. You really add I was talking to you about this before, maybe to Ben. You really showed, I think, to our audience, the human element behind the lawyer. Obviously it involves emotions, as you said, and you have to navigate that, but you've really showed a human element. So anyway, I really appreciate you joining. Ben, did you have anything else?
Just thank you so much. And for all our listeners, we're at toodadtoquit.com, toodadtoquit on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and now we just opened up Rumble as well. So as days go on, we are going to keep getting you the content. And for all of you with ADHD and not a lot of time on your hands, we also opened up a Too Dad to Quit clip channel, which we can take it in bits and pieces, share it with your friends. We're always looking for more and more guests and professionals, and we do really appreciate you listening, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you for listening to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. Available at toodadtoquit.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.